Hello everyone, Vincent Teo from HDTV Test here. I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator. Today, we're taking a look at the 65-inch Philips 804 OLED TV, which retails for a competitive £2,300. Key upgrades over 2018 models include a third-generation P5 video processing engine, as well as support for both Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus dynamic metadata formats. The Philips 804 is a direct replacement for the 803, so it's hardly surprising that the design is almost an exact carbon copy. The super-thin panel sits on a pair of shiny metallic feet peeking out from underneath the screen, giving the television an extremely low profile which may make soundbar placement difficult. If you put the Sennheiser Ambio soundbar here, then basically only the top half of the screen will be visible. In other words, if the telly was showing the full Premier League table, you won't be able to see Manchester United. So no soundbar, but at least the inbuilt speakers deliver very decent audio quality with impressive dialogue clarity and imaging. Among all the non-flagship 2019 OLEDs with downfiring speakers, the 804 sounded the most well-tuned to my ears. The connections are found on the left rear of the display, including 4 full bandwidth HDMI 2.0B ports whose only HDMI 2.1 feature supported is ALLM or Auto Low Latency mode. At the back of the TV, you can also find LED modules that make up the Philips 804's 3-sided Ambilight technology. The supplied remote control is a typical Philips affair with a QWERTY keyboard around the back. While the concept is beautiful in theory to enter your Netflix login details, so you can start scrolling through endless trailers for 30 minutes before deciding on what to watch. The fact that the keyboard is not backlit and that you have to press the function button to type in any numbers make it less useful in practice. The Philips 804 comes loaded with Android 9.0 Pie, and the interface feels very slick and responsive as we jumped from one app to another. It surely isn't handicapped by the MediaTek chipset with 2.5 GB of RAM. The usual collection of Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, YouTube and Rakuten TV video-on-demand services are all present, and the Prime Video app even displays an HDR10 Plus pop-up notification when an HDR show is played, which we believe is a world first among consumer TVs. Within the legacy Philips TV Collection app, there is also a selection of adult video content which should keep your hands full if you are into that kind of thing. Before I proceed to talk about picture quality, I would like to give a quick shout out to Richard Sounds Manchester for sponsoring this video. If you are thinking about getting a new TV, even if it's not the Philips 804, please support the channel by considering buying from them. Call 0333 900 0086, mention HDTV Test, and you'll receive great price and service. Thanks again for your support. Okay. The Philips 65 OLED 804 uses a 2019 WRGB OLED panel from LG Display, as indicated by the notched subpixels. Due to OLED's self-emissive display properties, the Philips 804 can deliver true blacks, vibrant colors, and wide viewing angles. But then, the same can be said for any OLED TV under the sun, including the Philips 803. So let's try and find some differences. On 2018 Philips OLEDs, such as the 903 and 803, shadow detail was crushed in all HDR picture presets. We're happy to see that this has been fixed on the 804, with the default brightness value of 50 correctly revealing the plush bars and checkerboard background in the Spears & Munsell UHD HDR benchmark disc. So a very big thank you to Philips TV engineer for listening to feedback. All 2018 and 2019 OLED TVs except those from Panasonic are affected by near black chrominance overshoot, manifesting as flashing artifacts in dark scenes, especially heavily compressed ones. But we only saw it very rarely on our 65-inch 804 review sample. Contrast ratio is determined not only by blacks, but also by white, and the Philips OLED 804 features a more aggressive automatic brightness limiter or ABL in SDR mode, so scenes that are predominantly bright would look dimmer than rival 2019 OLEDs if they were calibrated to the same peak white target at 10% window. Thankfully, the ABL was more relaxed for HDR, so bright sequences in 4K Blu-ray movies will still deliver sufficient impact on an equal level with other 2019 OLEDs. We experimented briefly with perfect natural reality, Philips SDR to HDR conversion technology, and discovered that what it does is to slightly boost the luminance of bright objects while increasing the gamma of darkened areas to make things pop. While the resulting SDR to HDR effect is the least offensive among all TVs we've tested, we generally refrain from using SDR to HDR conversion in the interest of preserving the creator's intent. For calibration, Philips has added a 20-point white balance control in addition to the existing 2-point system to achieve greater precision. We obtained outstanding SDR color accuracy after calibration, with an average delta error of less than 1 in this challenging color checker SG chart, where 140 color patches were measured, translating to highly realistic and natural colors including skin tones in real-world material. The 804 uses an OLED panel with native 120Hz refresh rate, and so can apply 5.5 pull-down correctly to present 24 frames per second films smoothly without telecinic judder, as long as motion styles is not switched off. If you are sensitive to the judder that is inherent in 24p movies, you can use perfect natural motion to smooth things out. This is equivalent to the judder reduction or the judder setting found on Samsung and LG TVs. But please bear in mind that even the minimum settings would introduce soap opera effect and interpolation artifacts. We prefer to turn perfect natural motion off because we are purists. Perfect clear motion applies motion compensated frame interpolation or MCFI to 50Hz or 60Hz material, increasing motion resolution from the sample and hold baseline of 300 lines to the current OLED ceiling of 650 lines. That said, with motion styles engaged, the Philips 804 would exhibit some microstutter with mixed edits on 50Hz broadcast content, particularly noticeable around head movements and hand gestures. So if you want the smoothest playback from Freeview or SkyQ, you should strongly consider turning off motion styles or even switching to game mode to disable all motion processing. Next, video processing. And given Philips' penchant for picture processing, there are a few things to talk about. First, upscaling, as judged using the SMPTE RP133 test card in 576i. And even though the result looked sharp and detailed, we saw more ringing, overshoot, and fizziness than OLED TVs from other brands. It turned out that the Philips 804 was applying some undefeatable edge enhancement at all times, even with sharpness set to 0 and ultra resolution disabled. The only way to defeat the forced sharpening is by selecting monitor mode, which unfortunately is not available in HDR mode or when the TV receives 444 or RGB video signal. It may cross the minds of some of you resourceful video enthusiasts out there to use monitor mode when watching 1080p Blu-rays, but then most video processing including 5.5 pull-down would be disabled, so you would see telecinic judder in slow panning shots instead. While casual viewers won't mind the extra sharpness sprinkled in, Philips should seriously consider implementing a true off switch in the movie or ISF picture modes for videophiles who wish to enjoy films without having to endure undefeatable edge enhancement. Last year's Philips OLEDs tended to exhibit harsh posterization in certain bright color tones during 4K Blu-ray playback. We checked out many of the same scenes on the Philips 804 and are pleased to report that the company has made improvements in this area. Although LG and Sony OLEDs still presented smoother gradients even without the help of smooth gradation. Bright uniformity on our review unit looked exceedingly clean, with no sign of banding, dirty screen effect or color tinting at all as we ran through full-field gray slides at various brightness intervals. Dark uniformity is a slightly different story though. In a pitch-black room, we could see vignetting along the sides, on the left more so than the right, meaning that shadow detail in these regions would be missing in very dark scenes, such as this one from the final Harry Potter movie. For HDR, peak brightness measured 720 nits on a 10% window at D65 wide point, and 150 nits full field. Interestingly, the measurement would peak above 800 nits for a few milliseconds before eventually stabilizing at 720 nits on our review sample. So do not be alarmed if you see a wide variation in peak brightness figures from other publications. DCI-P3 color gamut coverage came in at 98% UV, while Rec 2020 coverage was 74%. Just like all Philips OLED TVs to date, the 804 doesn't adapt its HDR10 tone curve based on static metadata of let's say 1000 nit versus 4000 nit content. Instead, tone mapping of HDR10 video seemed to be governed by the HDR Perfect setting. HDR Perfect Off would seek to retain specular highlight detail up to 4000 nits, whereas HDR Perfect Minimum appeared to be optimized for 1000 nit content. Going beyond minimum would just progressively over-brighten the PQ EOTF tracking and blow out more specular highlight detail, with the ironically named auto being the worst. Thankfully then that the Philips 804 supports both Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus dynamic metadata formats, allowing for tone curve optimization on a scene-by-scene or even frame-by-frame basis. Potential buyers will be pleased to know that the Dolby Vision profile implemented on the 804 is TV-led rather than the low-latency version found on Sony TVs, so Dolby Vision content would look as bright and impactful as on LG and Panasonic OLEDs. For gaming, input lag measured 33 milliseconds in both 1080p SDR and 4K HDR game modes. As mentioned before, the Philips 804 supports ALLM or Auto Low Latency mode, but it's turned off by default. You'll need to manually engage Auto Game mode just once for the relevant HDMI port before the TV will automatically kick into game mode whenever you start playing a game from a compatible console such as the Xbox One X. Some potential buyers still have reservations about OLED TV technology due to the risk of permanent screen burn, but as our 6-month real-world burn-in test has proven, as long as you vary the content on screen and switch off the TV by putting it into standby so compensation cycles can run, then a 2018 and later OLED TV shouldn't develop permanent burn-in. Additional anti-screen burn measures implemented on the Philips 804 include a screensaver of Philips logo floating around and pixel shifting, whose effect is more apparent on this overscan test pattern than in real-world content. While the pixel shifting cannot be disabled, it can be reset by turning the screen off and on again. Last but not least, Ambilight. We are big fans of bias lighting, even on OLED TVs which can produce true blacks. A gentle amount of bias lighting can provide a stable level of background illumination to prevent your pupils from closing or opening whenever the picture on screen cuts from dark to bright and vice versa, thus reducing eye strain. Our preference is to set Ambilight to produce constant D65 white and take the default brightness down to avoid overpowering shadow detail, especially during HDR viewing. To sum up, the 65-inch 804 is yet another high-quality OLED television from Philips, providing a viable alternative to those who, for one reason or another, don't want to go with LG, Panasonic or Sony. While its HDR10 tone mapping and gaming responsiveness lagged behind the competition, the Philips 804's OLED-driven contrast performance, post-calibration color accuracy, dual Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus support, as well as unique Ambilight technology earned the TV our highly recommended award. If you found this video useful, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.